Donald Trump's speech at the UN reaffirmed the US president's support for Israel in the face of growing calls for Palestinian statehood from America's traditional allies. It's another fault line in the divisions between the United States and Europe on the global stage. And how long can the US continue its unwavering support for Israel while opposing voices at home grow louder? I'm Hazem Sika. This is the Newsmakers. There's UN speeches from US presidents, and then there's Donald Trump's speeches. It was combative, fiery, and full of the self-promotion and brashness we've come to expect from him. On the Middle East, Trump took aim at the new efforts to promote Palestinian statehood. He accused Hamas of blocking peace and demanded the release of the remaining Israeli hostages. But is the tide of public opinion among Americans turning away from unwavering support for Israel and towards growing sympathy for Palestinians over Israel's relentless assault on Gaza? And what will that mean for Israel's most steadfast ally going forward? Here's a look.
Donald Trump 2.0 took the stage at the UN General Assembly. In an hour-long speech, the US president attacked his opponents, defended his record, and questioned the UN's purpose. From casting himself as a peacemaker to making misleading claims on climate change, Trump was in full form. And at a time when more European countries are recognizing Palestine, he stood firmly behind Israel.
We can't forget October 7th, can we? Now, as if to encourage continued conflict, some of this body is seeking to unilaterally recognize a Palestinian state. The rewards would be too great for Hamas.
But in a bilateral meeting, French President Emmanuel Macron, who is leading the call for a two-state solution, challenged Trump, saying recognition does not mean forgetting the Hamas attack.
After almost 2 years of war, what is the result? Once again, they killed the top leaders of Hamas. It works. This is a great achievement. But at the same time, you have as many Hamas fighters as you had the first day. So it doesn't work to dismantle the Hamas. This is not the right way to proceed.
Trump also held a summit with the leaders of regional and Islamic countries on the sidelines, calling it his most important meeting. And he insisted that he could end the war.
We're here to see if we can get the hostages back and get the war over and get back to life in the Middle East, which is a beautiful life, but it's much more beautiful without wars, right?
And at home, Trump is also facing growing disapproval over his strong support for Israel. A recent Quinnipiac University survey found that 6 in 10 voters in the US oppose sending military aid to Israel, while half call the war on Gaza a genocide. Some of those voices were heard outside the UN headquarters as the world leaders gathered.
People ask the leaders, the UN meeting, the leaders of states around the world, to listen to the voice asking to stop the genocide.
While the Palestinian question is widening the gap between the US and some of its European allies, it is not the only fault line. At the podium, Trump slammed Europe's migration policy.
It's time to end the failed experiment of open borders. You have to end it now. See, I can tell you, I'm really good at this stuff. Your countries are going to hell.
And he pushed the EU to stop buying Russian oil and gas.
Think of it. They're funding the war against themselves. Who the hell ever heard of that one?
So once again, the world has heard Trump's unfiltered and unconventional vision. And that has left many worrying about the course of the international world order.
Well, joining me now to debate that and much more are our guests from Tel Aviv, political analyst and contributor to Haaretz newspaper, Akiva Eldar. From Washington, D.C., former member of the United States Secret Service and current Sergeant at Arms of the Maryland Republican Party, Barry Donadio. And from New York, we have Palestinian political organizer and researcher Raja Abdul Haq. Good to have you all with us. Akiva, if I could start with you. Your reaction to what Trump said in that hunger speech on the Middle East. Admittedly, it wasn't much, but that in itself tells us a lot as well, doesn't it?
Well, I would wait until Monday because, as we have learned in the last 8 months, and actually even in his first term as president, the White House, that depends who is the last one to speak to him and to convince him what should be the next step. And it seems that Netanyahu will be the last one, since he is invited to the White House and he will speak to the president next Monday. So whatever Trump said today in the UN meeting, I think will not be relevant after Monday. Netanyahu convinced Trump again and again to follow his interests. When it comes to Iran, he did it. He pulled out 10 years ago from the nuclear agreement. Actually, Trump was suggesting a two-state solution in 2020 in what he called the deal of the century. And he suggested a two-state solution, and Netanyahu accepted it because he trusted that the Hamas will not allow it. What's happening now, and I think that this is something that Trump will have to deal with, is there is a consensus. Actually, Netanyahu can declare victory that Hamas is not going to be part of the solution. Hamas, there is a wall-to-wall agreement that Hamas is a problem and Hamas has to go. And this, actually, both Trump and Netanyahu can declare victory. But I believe we'll come to this later. I think it has nothing to do with the interest of the United States or, for that matter, the interest of the Israeli people.
Barry, Donadio, this seems to be part of a deepening rift between the United States and Europe, and we heard a lot of it in Trump's speech on a number of issues. What implications, though, does that have, do you think, for a lasting solution in the Middle East?
Yeah, thanks for having me. You know, we saw President Trump go to the podium with like a lukewarm clapping, receiving of the audience. He was able to get some chuckles out of the crowd by some of his jokes. But, you know, beyond that, he was kind of all over the spectrum, going from one subject to another. I'm not quite sure if they followed his whole speech. I had to watch it personally a couple of times. But will this get in the way of peace in the Middle East? I don't think so. I think what this really amounts to is Hamas releasing hostages. At the end of the day, when they do such a thing, when they release hostages, this war will essentially be over in Gaza. I don't think Israel will have any purpose of continuing a military operation if Hamas ceases to exist as an armed militia. And I compare this to the end of World War II. We certainly wouldn't let the Nazis continue some government a year after they were beaten in battle and in a war. So I think that's what this rests upon. And I think the Europeans will follow suit. And we saw many auxiliary meetings after his speech, which I thought were positive, even the one with President Erdogan sitting right next to him, as well as one with the French president. And they all seem to agree that, yes, Trump did support this war has to be coming to a close very, very soon. I think when he meets with Benjamin Netanyahu, the word from Trump is going to be, hey, this has to end literally immediately. Finish up what you're doing in Gaza City and get it over with. We have no more time left.
Raja Abdul Haq, what did you make of President Trump's comments, and in particular the fact that he seemed to make passing mention of the situation in the Middle East through what was a long speech? What does that tell you?
Well, a couple of things. I mean, initially, it's obvious that Trump is sticking with the typical propaganda talking point, which is that this is about the Israeli captives in Gaza, and that's it. And as soon as the former guest mentioned, which of course I completely disagree with that, the concept that the genocide in Gaza will end as soon as the captives are released. As a matter of fact, since day one, the Palestinian resistance, the Palestinian leadership has made it clear that they are ready for prisoner exchange deal as soon as the second day after October 7. It was very obvious from day one. And it was very obvious that the only time that Israel and the United States were able to release Israeli captives were through negotiation and actually making a deal with the Palestinian resistance. That the Israeli captives today are used as a way to legitimize and justify the ethnic cleansing in Palestine, to legitimize and justify the genocides, the extermination of the people in Gaza, the extermination of every single living, the level to extermination of the feeling of safety, even in hospitals and schools and houses of worship. This is not about the captives. This is an explicit campaign to exterminate the Palestinian people from Gaza. And everything else that is used is pure propaganda to justify that genocide. And just like the United States, when invaded Iraq and Afghanistan, they used the same ideas of quote-unquote war on terror and radical Islam to justify this wars. This is like an ABC of how Europeans have colonized the world and how they have declared wars around the world. And I find it also baffling to compare the Palestinian resistance to the Nazis in Europe. I understand the trying to make a comparison about ending a war by defeating your enemy, but this is not a war between two sides. This is actually a settler colonial project that is committing a genocide and an extermination against a colonized people that are trying to survive by basically just aspiring to seek liberation and freedom through the basics of resistance, which is legitimized and validated by the international law and by human reasoning to begin with.
Akiva, what's your view on that? And is Israel using, as Raja has said, the Israeli hostages as an excuse to commit what's been termed a genocide of Palestinians in Gaza?
Well, I don't think that genocide is Netanyahu's ultimate dream. This is what he is trying to do. Actually, he looks at the victims of this war, not only the Palestinian, also the Israeli captives, as collateral damage to the real war that he is insisting on carrying on. And this is the war against the PLO, not against Hamas. If I was the speechwriter of a Palestinian leader that will include every single interest of Israel, security, two-state solution, ending the violence, getting rid of Hamas, wouldn't be different than the delivery of President Abbas at the UN. And this is Netanyahu's problem. He keeps saying that he will not accept the Hamas or the Palestinian Authority as the regime, the next regime in Gaza. He doesn't want to talk about the day after the war. What is his exit strategy? Nobody knows. And he said again and again, and partners from the radical right, that if you don't want Hamas, you are going to get the Palestinian Authority, the PLO, Oslo Agreement, with a full-fledged negotiations on the two-state solution. And this is Netanyahu's worst dream. He actually promised his party and the Israeli people that he even passed it in the Knesset, that as long as he is there, there will not be a Palestinian state, nowhere. So the question is whether President Trump will adopt the message that is coming from the international community, from Europe, from Australia, from Canada. And actually, this was his baby, that the solution is a two-state solution, because the other option is full-fledged apartheid.
Barry Donadio, I want to ask you about a criticism that has been made of Trump in his dealings with Israel on this, because the United States is a major player in all of this, regardless of where you stand on this whole issue. Should he be doing more to apply pressure on Israel? The criticism that has been made is that he is essentially giving Netanyahu a blank check to do what he wants as far as Israel's conduct of the war in Gaza is concerned. What do you say to that?
Yeah, you bring up a very good point. We all have to remember Israel does what Israel wants. We don't control Israel. It is a sovereign nation. However, yes, we do support Israel overall, militarily, politically. But I think there has been some kind of maybe disagreement or misunderstanding between Benjamin Netanyahu and Trump recently. If we read the body language of President Trump on the matter, it just seems like he's kind of pushed away back from Benjamin Netanyahu also slightly. I think he's fed up, almost like he's fed up with the war in Ukraine. He wants an end to this. I don't think I agree with your other guests. I don't think that it is Israel's intent to do a mass genocide. We have to remember this is a full combat zone. There's belt-fed machine guns being shot in Gaza right now, artillery, tanks. People get hurt in war. That's not what anybody wants. Personally, I don't want that, and I don't want any Palestinians hurt. What I do want is Hamas, and Trump wants Hamas to be eliminated and never a threat to anybody in the region. So ultimately, I think you're going to see Trump pressuring Benjamin Netanyahu to bring this to a stop or finish very, very quickly.
And what's next?
Raja Abdul Haq, I want to turn to you on this. I'll come back to you in a moment, Akiva. But I know you want to respond to what you've been hearing there from our other two guests. But I want to also ask you also about the tide of opinion in the U.S. right now, because public opinion polls are showing that there is increasingly less support for Israel and more sympathy for Palestinians. And what's been happening in Gaza. How is that factoring in as much as it is at all right now? How is that factoring into the whole public debate on Israel and Palestine right now? And could it influence U.S. foreign policy going forward?
Well, there are a couple of things. I mean, mainstream media does its job at manufacturing consent to make sure that American general public in general are aligned with the American foreign policies. This is how America deals with its politics internally and externally. This is a very common thing. But number two, America is not truly a representative democracy where the interests and the aspirations of the general public actually make a difference when it comes to policy making. As we know, America is an oligarchy, meaning that interest groups, lobbies, and those who and the industrial complex that actually support the politics of the empire are the ones that truly influence the policy making in the United States of America. As we've seen in the past 2 years, the unprecedented level of protesting, the encampments in universities, the student bodies coming out and taking to the streets in the thousands of people. These polls that are actively talking about the need for the United States and Israel to end the genocide in Gaza. But none of that have translated into policy changes in the U.S. As a matter of fact, the opposite has happened, which is the U.S. has cracked down on protests and student encampments, on anybody who speaks up against the genocide in Gaza. The United States is not as democratic as people would like to make it. So I don't personally think that the change in the public opinion will make a massive shift or rift between the U.S. and Israel, because at the end of the day, Israel and the U.S. are two parties of one. They're part and parcel of the same agenda in the region, which is American and European hegemony that is being currently today being spearled by Israel. And I completely disagree that Netanyahu and Trump are in disagreement. What we see publicly, this so-called public disagreement between them is in my opinion, I think is just a farce, or it's more of like a management tactic to manage the genocide in Gaza. On the one hand, you have a leader who's Netanyahu, who's going full on genocide in command, genocidal on command, and then you have Trump who's acting like the good cop. So you have a good cop, bad cop, and both are managing the quote unquote conflict in the region by using this mechanism. So you have Trump who comes in and he threatens Iran, for example, and gives it 60-day ultimatum. And literally in the 61st day, Israel, with the help of the United States, attacks Iran. So you can't tell me that there's disagreements. This public, the so-called disagreements between them is part of the deception strategy that Trump and Netanyahu have been doing. And this was done by even Biden from before. And finally, even the latest attack on Hamas leaders, not all of Hamas leaders, by the way, only the leaders that are part and parcel of the negotiating team. So meaning that Israel and the United States are not really interested in negotiating. They want to get rid of this problem of Israeli captives to continue the genocide. But this attack happened after Trump sent a deceptive new deal to Hamas in order for Hamas to meet together and to actually discuss and brainstorm about that deal. And Israel took advantage of that moment to actually attack them. So at the end of the day, what we're witnessing, I just want to finish this. Sure. At the end of the day, what we are witnessing now is this complete collaboration and playing the good cop, bad cop in a way to manage this genocide on Gaza and to absorb any kind of pressure from around the world. Because anytime the people complain about the genocide on Gaza and seeing it live streamed on their TV and social media, Trump and the United States government will come out and say, well, we're doing something. We're so close to the ceasefire. Be careful. Please be patient with us. This will be done soon. Okay. This is the whole point of this.
All right. I want to come back to Akiva now and get his take on some of this, in particular the public mood in the U.S. right now, and whether that is making any difference in Israel's policy and how that's being received in Israel.
Well, we don't have to go as far as, crossing the ocean. The Israeli public opinion has been changing. According to the last polls, if there were elections today, Netanyahu would become history. And we would have a center-left government. The Israelis don't really want to become Sparta or Masada, what Netanyahu has promised us, blood, sweat, and death. This is not the time of the Second World War. We are in a different world. The Israeli people are fed up. The Israeli economy cannot afford this. And yes, what we hear from our American allies, the American people, and the American Jewish community, that Israel is becoming from an asset to a nuisance to the American people, and the support of Israel make them look like collaborators with genocide. If you support Israel, you support a country that, according to the public opinion worldwide, Israel is committing genocide and is not willing to come to terms with the European, with the United States even, because what Mr. Witkoff offered Israel and what Qatar offered Israel was ending the war, getting back the captives, and making sure that Israel will not go back to Gaza afterwards. What Netanyahu wants is to have, as you said, a free ticket to go back, a free check from President Trump that we will get. The only thing that the Hamas is holding are the Israeli captives. Once they will turn them back. If I was a leader of the Hamas, I would insist to get guarantees from the international community and from the President of the United States that ending the war means ending the war. No more ethnic cleansing, no more Israeli settlements. And number two, I want to hear what's next. Right. Okay, Hamas is done. They have waved dozens of white flags. But what happens to Gaza the day after? The 2 million people that are dying every day. And it seems that Trump is escaping an answer to this very question.
Right. I want to give what's probably going to be the last word on this now to Barry, and I want to ask you as well about what we've been talking about here, the what seems to be a shift in sentiment among the American public. These polls that have been coming out, one from Quinnipiac saying 60% of voters oppose military aid to Israel, 50% calling the war in Gaza a genocide. What is your view on that? And does that have any implications for how the U.S. pursues this, whether it happens to be a Democratic or Republican administration?
Well, I don't doubt the statistic you're bringing up. It is quite possible, it is accurate, and I think this puts a lot of pressure on President Trump. I mean, Americans in general, we support Israel. However, we do not want any Palestinian killed. We look at Hamas as a terrorist organization that needs to cease to exist. Overall, we have to go back to the fact that there were no Israeli soldiers in Gaza on the 6th, okay? Then there was an attack into Israel, and now there's been hostages held, and somehow we're validating that it's okay to hold hostages as long as we negotiate with Hamas. And I don't think anywhere else in the world that is the case. So there is some narratives at play here, but overall, I do agree with you. There is a great deal of pressure on Trump, and the Americans want this to come to an end just like everybody else.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you to all three of our guests, and thank you for watching. You can follow us on Twitter and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Hazem Sika. We'll see you next time.